mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 3 of Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power, entitled Adar. And before I get started though, I want to start by apologizing for this video being a little bit late. It's Sunday, 9/11. I did watch this on time, but I have a good reason for delaying getting this video up. I have my fourth kid on the 7th, so things have been a little hectic to say the least. I was in the, I wasn't in the hospital. I was at the hospital for a little bit over 24 hours after that. And then, just trying to get things organized at home. So my wife and I were able to kind of like sneak in watching the show, but I haven't had a chance to get around to recording any videos yet. So that's why this one is late. But good news on that same front. Because of that, I'm now off work for a little bit of time. So I think you guys, especially those of you who kind of like follow me from show to show, true fans of this channel, like the OGs, like you guys will be getting your videos probably even a little bit more timely than usual. Usually I'm getting stuff up same day for the things that I cover, but I might be able to get things up maybe like an hour or two earlier now that I don't have to deal with work. So that's cool. Also, of course, want to mention at the top my two loyal patrons, Delvin Cox and Factual. If you guys are interested in joining the Patreon, there's a video on the channel called Major Announcement, and that one has all of the information on the Patreon, and there's a link to the Patreon in the description below the video. So let me make sure there's nothing else I need to mention. So I wanted to apologize for the delay, mention the patrons and the timeliness of the upcoming videos. Yep, so yeah, everything's looking good. Things are gonna normalize a little bit, I think, over the course of probably like September and October, and I should be able to get things out and get videos out fairly consistently. So back to this episode. So this episode of Adar, the title is named after this being, we don't know who it is yet, who the orcs are seemingly reporting to. They directly throw out in the episode that maybe this person is Sauron. We don't know. I think I read somewhere that when we do meet Adar, because we close out the episode by only seeing him like blurry, when we do meet him, he's going to be played by the same guy who played Benjen Stark on Game of Thrones. So that should be interesting to say the least. I think it's interesting that someone from Game of Thrones lore is going to be playing a character in this show, because the more I watch this show, the more parallels I see between this and Game of Thrones. And I acknowledge and understand that a lot of these things are not owned by Game of Thrones. It's, these are kinds of things that are common in fantasy. But I don't know. I think it's interesting that this show has touted, how much money it's cost to make. This show is directly up against a Game of Thrones television show. And yet and still, this show is doing virtually nothing to separate itself from Game of Thrones, which is a very big mistake to put Game of Thrones in my mind while I'm watching your show, just because that sets the bar too high. And Game of Thrones was doing things out of the gate, the important things that matter, very, very well. And this show has kind of struggled coming out of the gate with those things. So, not wise to really give me more reasons to compare you to Game of Thrones. But that's what I heard. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, supposedly the guy that played Benjen Stark is going to be playing Adar. I'm assuming we'll see him next week. So this episode, I thought this episode was better than the previous two. The story seems to finally be starting to take shape. I'm finding myself a little bit more invested in where the stories are going. So everything's taking shape pretty well. We don't see Prince Durin or Elrond this week, which was unfortunate because I found those aspects of the previous episode to be the stronger aspects of the show. I wanted to see where things were going to go with those two. But I'm also cool with, again, comparing to Game of Thrones, and I feel like we're going to be doing this a lot throughout the course of covering this show, but comparing this to Game of Thrones always had, say, just for a round number, say 10 concurrent storylines going on, right? You're not going to see all 10 of them every episode. You might have, one episode we're like, okay, we're gonna catch up with Arya this week. We're gonna catch up with Littlefinger this week. We're gonna catch up with Cersei this week. And then, next week, all right, this week we're gonna catch up with Daenerys. This week we're gonna catch up with Tyrion. This week we're gonna catch up with Jon Snow. So it's fine to not see Prince Durin this week. If that's how the show's gonna play out, that's cool with me. But I would have liked to have seen Prince Durin. But I'm not upset about not seeing Prince Durin or Elrond, because I did find what we got with Arondir and then the Galadriel and Halbrand combo. I did find that stuff to be pretty compelling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the episode from a character perspective, talk about what we saw with Arondir, talk about what we saw with Galadriel and Halbrand, and talk about what we saw with the Harfoots. And that's how I'm going to tackle this episode. And that's more than likely how I'm going to tackle this show going forward. If I covered Game of Thrones, if Game of Thrones existed while I was doing this channel and covering that show, that'd be the exact same way I would cover Game of Thrones. So I'm probably gonna end up taking that approach to House of the Dragon, but right now it's solely focused on like Targaryen stuff. So that might not change. It might just be a show where I'm gonna cover that. But I'm veering off here. So Arondir was taken captive by orcs at the end of episode 2, and then in this episode we see that he's essentially been enslaved by them, along with several other elves, and they're chained together by the ankle, and they're helping orcs build whatever this is underground. We see that they've had these tunnels running underground, the same ones that he discovered in what's her face's house. What's her name that has the son Theo? I'm forgetting her name, but they found the tunnels that are running underneath all these different cities and all these different areas, and they're like, okay, one, they discover that it looks like they're building something, but then two, they point out too that this helps the orcs stay out of the sunlight, and that's why they haven't been able to really see orcs or even know that they were still around. They've essentially been hiding underground. Arondir ends up kind of like befriending a couple of the other elves, and they kind of work out a plan like where it's like, okay, well, if we can see where we're at, if just one of us can escape, we can bring back enough people to shut this whole shit down. And that's actually a really good plan. And I like that there's a good scene here where even though it's completely ludicrous that Arondir could chop down this massive fucking tree with this axe, whatever, by himself, but I like the fact that him volunteering to cut down that tree was kind of like a callback to them discussing their plan, because it allows him to get a look at his surroundings. And he doesn't escape by the end of this episode, but because of that scene, we now know that at the very least, he has a visual idea of where he is. So I like how they did that. That's one of the things that I talk about the most on this channel, is how much I love when shows treat us like we have half a brain and don't walk us through everything and hold our hand through everything, explain everything. I like the fact that just him kind of like getting to the top to chop down that tree and looking around was meant for us to go, oh, right, because they were talking about being able to see their surroundings. So nice scene there. They try to escape later toward the end of the episode, and everything kind of seems to be going good. There's a great scene with one of the orcs offering them water, and they all kind of approach it as if it might be poisoned or something like that. And then the orc ends up killing one of the elves, but that was a pretty intense scene. Didn't know what was going to happen there. But they try to escape. They get an animal called a warg sicked on them, which finally I'm like, okay, we get to see something clearly. I complained after episodes 1 and 2 about how the big monsters that they gave us in each of those episodes were either shrouded in darkness or underwater. So I'm glad that we got to see something in the daytime, because don't brag about how much money you spent on the show and then hide these creatures and whatnot. So I'm glad we got to see this creature at play. It looked pretty cool. Everyone ends up dying. Not everyone, but everyone that we were kind of like introduced to that were meant to matter in this scene ends up dying at some point throughout the episode. The one guy, after he drinks the non-poison water, gets his throat cut, and the other guy, I think another 2 die during this whole warg situation when they're all trying to escape. And Arondir doesn't quite make it. He sees one other guy get hit with a few arrows. That guy goes down, and they take Arondir and they take him back, and they say take him to Adar, and then we see Adar walking, assuming this is Adar, walking toward him, and he's all blurry. We don't get a clear look at him before the episode ends. But I I like the Arondir stuff this week just because it gave us the best action of the episode. Well, subjective whether that was the best action, but it gave us some really good action this week, which I can respect and admire. And then I liked learning about what the orcs' plan is because, they mention. Well, I'll pause on what I was about to say, and I'll save it for this portion where I'm going to talk about Galadriel and Halbrand, because this is where I think this show and this episode in particular is going to start to kind of like tie some of these stories together. Because right now, after this episode, the Galadriel and Halbrand storyline is now connected to the Arondir storyline. So Galadriel and Halbrand end up in Numenor. They get picked up by this captain on this ship, and he takes them to Numenor, which, in yet another kind of thing that you kind of can't help but think Game of Thrones. As they're approaching the gates of Numenor, it looks a lot like Braavos in Game of Thrones. And then when you get inside, it looks like Gondor, if you remember from Return of the King. And there's actually a reason for that. Gondor was founded by Sildore and his brother, and we meet Sildore in this episode. I don't know if I need to explain who Sildore is, because I kind of feel like anybody who watches this show has watched the Lord of the Rings movies, but I'll just real quick. Sildore is the guy who I think at the very, very, very beginning of Fellowship, we see him essentially cut the ring off of Sauron's hand during this battle, and he's the first one that just can't destroy it. So we meet Sildore in this episode, which was really cool. I did the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme. We were like, oh, it's my son. Actually, I don't even think his name is said before I see it on the screen because of the captions. But I did the Leo point at the screen like, oh shit, Sildore. But they're saved by this captain who happens to be Sildore's father, and he takes them to Numenor. When they get there, Galadriel explains to Halbrand that the elves essentially gifted this place to these people because they helped out with the fight against Morgoth. And they meet the Queen Regent, who I just want to point out, I'm prepared for internet backlash at this Queen Regent being black, because it's like, why not? Let's complain about a black Harfoot, but we're not going to complain. I'm not even going to go on the tangent. But her and the Queen Regent get into it. Her, Galadriel, and the Queen Regent get into it, and this kind of brings up one of the issues that I'm having with the show, and it's that Galadriel is obnoxious, combative, arrogant. Like, she's like a Karen, and we don't, like, the last thing we need in a world that is replete with Karens is another fucking Karen on television. And, like, Galadriel is obnoxious in this episode. Completely and totally obnoxious. And she kind of has been the whole time. But, when you have these fantasy shows, you're going to have good guys and bad guys. That's the nature of a fantasy show. Good versus evil. You've already got the antagonist built in. Try to make the protagonist a little likable. Like, Galadriel is fucking obnoxious. Like, I can't, like, why is she such an asshole all of the time? Like, and not even an asshole, just unlikable. Like, she doesn't necessarily do mean things. Like, she's just a very unlikable person. Like, she just seems like somebody who would have an attitude all the time, because she does in the show. She has an attitude all the time. Let's see. So we find out that the queen is suspicious of the captain's motives. Well, one, because I think his name means like elf friend or something like that. And then that also, because of that, she tasked him with watching over Galadriel, which he does. I don't know if you call it a good or bad job. He takes her to the Hall of Lore. I feel like he probably should have kept her there and not taken her somewhere, but whatever. They take off. But we also find out in the Hall of Lore that their king is exiled for being an elf supporter as well, which is why the black woman that we see is the Queen Regent. So it's going to be interesting to find out what happened with this king, especially because we see the Queen Regent at the end of the episode talking to somebody and says like, what I think it was the king actually. She says, the day where we feared has come, the elf is here, something like that. So that's intriguing. Galadriel also finds out that Sauron and the orcs, which is what I was saying at the beginning, appear to be building something with these tunnels that are underground. And I figure that's got to be Mordor, right? That's intriguing as well. But now, like I said, that now is intrinsically linked the Galadriel and Halbrand stories with the with the Arondir story. Also, we find out that Halbrand is the king of the Southlands, which is where Arondir is currently being held captive. So it seems that those paths are destined to cross at some point. I would imagine that's going to be very soon. But I don't even know how many episodes there are. I believe 8. I'm not sure, but if there's 8, that means the next episode means we're going to be halfway through. So there's not a lot of time before we're going to find out how these stories are going to connect. But it looks like those stories are on a collision course. I think the Durin and Elrond thing is also, I think, going to be tied into that as well, because it looks like they're going to be building something that's going to be probably play a factor in the creation of the rings or something to that effect. But the Harfoots are who we spend the remainder of the episode with, and the Harfoots continue to be completely uninteresting. You know, they have a nice scene where they name off previous Harfoots that have been lost on previous Harfoots. They run off the names of Harfoots that have been lost on previous migrations, and that sets up a scene later where after Nori essentially gets them pushed to the back of the caravan with her behavior and her insistence on protecting this stranger, the mother kind of hits her with the like, yeah, you essentially put us on next year's list, which I thought that was it wasn't meant to be funny, but but I feel like the Nori stuff is I'm sorry. I feel like the Harfoot storyline in general is like bordering on bad at this point. It's a story like right now. These are a group of people who are in the middle of a migration, but their storyline is stuck in the fucking mud, and the irony of that is just wild to me. This like what we get it. Nori is obsessed beyond all reasonable, beyond all reason about protecting this stranger. We get it. We know that he's important. We know that she wants to protect this guy, and she's gonna cause all kinds of trouble. In order to do it, I under fucking stand. Can we move this plot line some fucking where, please? Because the Harfoots are boring the fuck out of me, and that's what the problem too is that the Hobbits are the best part of the Lord of the Rings movies. Like the Two Towers is probably my least favorite of the 3, and that's because the final hour that's like all a battle is incredible. But those first 2 hours, pretty much everything that doesn't involve Sam, Frodo, and Smeagol is not that great. And it sucks to be watching a new Lord of the Rings property and be watching, you know, a variation of the Hobbits, and they're boring as fuck. Like they're not interesting. Like even the characters, none of them are interesting. Like I need to understand why anything involving them is happening right now, because I could see everyone else's place in the storyline right now. I don't see their place. They're not doing anything. They haven't done anything. They're not compelling characters. Like something needs to happen with the Harfoots right the fuck now, because I'm totally checked out. Nothing happened with them this week other than just, yeah, now they're at the back of the caravan. Like they haven't done shit with this story. So yeah, done with the fucking Harfoots, man. So closing out with a couple of thoughts. A ton of beautiful drone shots on this show, in this episode. You know, you see where the money goes. You know, the show looks beautiful, no denying that. It's visually stunning, but I do find myself concerned at times about what feels to me like too much importance on spectacle and not enough on the things that matter. And again, Harfoots, perfect example. Like that's what I care about. I don't give a fuck about these drone shots and like all of the fucking computer animation and all of this shit. It looks amazing. It's vibrant. It's incredible, but I don't fucking care. Like, make this shit interesting. And I'm not saying it's not interesting. I enjoy the show. I think the best way to describe how I feel about the show is I like it, I don't love it. And this is why. Don't have this fucking Harfoot storyline stuck in the mud, and I can't get over the irony of how they're migrating and the story's not moving. But you know, those are the things that need to be working, not fucking drone shots. Like, you're not gonna buy me with drone shots. You're gonna buy me with making the Harfoots interesting. And then I'm going to go, this show is compelling. It has compelling storylines. These characters are three-dimensional and vibrant and rich, and they're great and they're interesting, and they're terrible, which still makes them interesting, whatever. And then on top of that, it looks incredible. Not like, I shouldn't be leading with it looks incredible. And that's what everyone leads with, because they're too chicken shit to criticize the aspects of the show that aren't that great. So they always lead with, oh, it looks amazing. It looks amazing. And it does. But like, fix the Harfoot shit, please. And then like, I really would like, I mean, it's too late. They can't change anything now. The show's done. But like, I think they're getting everything else right now. You know, like I said, I found the Arondir stuff to be way more compelling this week. I found Galadriel and Halbrand to be compelling this week. I can now see a little bit more of where that story is going and how it's going to merge with the other ones. So like, things are starting to gel. This show could move from like it to love it. There's still 5 episodes left, but there are flaws, and they all feel like things that could be easily remedied if there wasn't so much emphasis put on the visuals. And like that's something, I can't prove that, obviously, but you know, I look at the visuals and I look at the things that are flawed on this show that could be easily repaired, and I can't help but go like, yeah, maybe if you didn't put so much effort in the drone shots, and you put a little bit more effort into moving this storyline along, we'd be better off. I know you can't make the elves less unlikable, but Arondir is starting to kind of come around maybe on Arondir, but man, Galadriel, bro. She is so fucking annoying. The scene where Halbrand steals that pen or whatever from those guys, I'm just going to call it a pub because they were all drinking, and he gets discovered and they have a fight scene. That fight scene was great and considerably more violent than I was expecting from this show. So that's going to be kind of cool if we can get this show to be a little bit darker and a little bit more scary. Like, not just like, oh, there's orcs and they have scary faces, but you know, I'm all for a little bit turn up the violence meter a little bit. So again, wrapping up, I thought this episode was really good, solid episode, the best of the 3 in my opinion so far. I see the story taking shape. I like what I'm seeing with the story taking shape. Visuals great, obviously. Just the Harfoots fucking suck, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And truthfully, I feel like the Harfoot stuff's gonna come around. It's just, I don't know why they're dragging their feet with it. I like that I said something about hobbits and feet. Anyway, I will see you guys next week for episode 4. Until then, peace.